Gentle Hero, Chapter 1. Officer Rob Martinez casually steered his police cruiser through the quiet streets of an industrial area located in a suburb of Los Angeles, driving his vehicle at a slow enough pace to observe the warehouses and manufacturing businesses housed there. Coldly illuminated in the darkness by glaring lights, many of the buildings sat securely behind heavily padlocked gates and chain-link fences supporting strands of barbed wire to prevent trespassing. 1:30 a.m. didn't fall within his regular patrol schedule, but he had volunteered to cover for a friend who needed some time off. Martinez was unmarried and maintained a more flexible schedule than most, and he welcomed a shift that promised to be quiet and uneventful. Observing empty streets and parking lots he had been patrolling that night, he found everything calm and quiet. Sipping a cup of coffee in the seat next to him, his partner, Linda Anders, was fighting boredom and drowsiness, having exhausted conversation topics that generally helped them pass the time. It would be another 3 hours before the two of them could clock out. She emitted a weary sigh and nodded her head from side to side to stretch the muscles in her neck. As Martinez's attention turned from his perusal of the buildings along the route, he was startled to see, illuminated by his headlights, a small human figure less than 500 feet before them. The individual was wandering down the middle of the street, headed straight toward the car. Braking, he strained to see who or what was approaching them. "What?" Officer Anders asked as the car stopped. "What's that?" Martinez responded with a nod of his head. Anders followed his gaze and squinted her eyes as she focused on the figure headed in their direction. "What in the hell?" she muttered, though the small individual moved slowly, as if half asleep. It wasn't long before it was close enough for them to see that it was a young black girl, perhaps 6 years old. Her dark hair was combed into a single braid at the back, and she was dressed in pale pink corduroy overalls, worn over a simple white shirt. On her feet she wore sneakers, brightly decorated with Disney princess characters. Her eyes were opened wide, and she stared directly into the officer's vehicle headlights, with a look of combined confusion and terror. The vision before him was so unexpected and out of place, almost dreamlike, that it took Martinez a moment to understand what he was seeing before he could manage to move. Both officers stepped from the car, and Martinez approached the child as Anders remained beside her car door. The girl gave no indication she could see him as he knelt before her. Her wide-eyed expression remained fixed and straight ahead, and she would have walked into him if he hadn't stopped her by gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "Hey there," he said to her in a soft voice. Although she stopped walking, she pulled her shoulders from his grasp with a slight moan. "Looks like she's in shock," Anders deduced. "Bring me that bottle of water from the front seat, will you?" Martinez asked as he nodded in agreement. As Anders complied, he removed his jacket and placed it around the girl's shoulders. "Can you tell me your name?" Martinez asked her. There was no response. "Your mom? Your dad? Are they around here someplace?" "Here," Anders said, standing beside him and handing him a bottle of water. "Any ideas?" he asked her. "Where's your maternal instincts?" "No idea," she replied. "Never had any relationship with kids outside of juvie." Unscrewing the lid from the plastic bottle, he held the water before the girl's mouth. "Here, drink this," he said to her. But she remained unchanged. He touched her lips with the water bottle and attempted to pour some into her mouth, but she turned her head slightly, allowing the liquid to dribble down the front of her shirt. "I'll call for child services," Anders offered. "This is beyond us." Sighing, Martinez stood, studying the girl's face as he replaced the lid on the bottle. "Well, I guess so," he said, looking around them for anyone to whom she might belong. "But let's get her out of this cold. Tell them we'll meet them at headquarters." Anders nodded as she walked back to the car, contacting her dispatcher with the radio microphone mounted on her shoulder. "Will you come with us, sweetheart?" Martinez asked the girl as he lightly nudged her toward the vehicle with his hand on her back. Slowly, he managed to move her toward his car, but as he opened the rear door, she suddenly stopped, reluctant to step inside. "It's okay," he said reassuringly. "You're safe with us. You're safe." Though she offered slight resistance, he managed to lead her into the back of the car, but instead of sitting on the seat, she huddled on the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees and burying her face. Martinez joined her in the back seat. "You drive," he told Anders. At police headquarters, Martinez found an empty room with a small sofa that he offered to the child, but she passed it up, preferring to sit on the floor in the corner. As in the car, she remained huddled there, her face hidden. Anders elected to complete necessary reports and left the door ajar as she departed, while Martinez seated himself on the floor near the girl. The officer had comforted survivors and many crime and accident victims in his 7 years with the department, but this one perplexed and troubled him far more than any he had experienced. It may have been the child's age and innocence that touched him so deeply, but it was the mystery of the source of her shock and his inability to comfort her that affected him most. He'd been giving a great deal of thought recently about the absence of a child in his life, and now he pondered what he would do if he were her father. What would he do to take away her suffering? As he waited for the child services worker to arrive, he did his best to comfort her with soothing conversation. "You're a very brave young lady," he told her. "I don't know what you've experienced, but I know it hasn't been easy for you. And I wish I could be as brave. You know, maybe if you tell me a little about what happened, I can help you. Won't you give me that chance?" None of his attempts to reach her yielded any change. "Hey," he said as he tenderly touched her arm in an attempt to gain her attention. With a gasp, she pulled away, turning to her side. "It would be best not to touch her," came a female voice from behind him. Martinez turned to see a thin, middle-aged lady standing in the open doorway, clutching several reports in her hand. "I was just trying to find some way to get through to her," he explained as he rose to his feet. The woman shook her head and indicated for him to come closer. "We don't know what she's experienced," she spoke to him in a hushed voice. "She may have been sexually abused. The inclination is to want to hug them and comfort them, but physical trauma can sometimes make them even more upset. I'm Barbara Walker. I'm the caseworker." Martinez shook her hand as she offered it. "How do you get through to her?" he asked. "I think she's in shock." "Well," she said, nodding, "the first thing we'll do is get her to a hospital and get her checked out. I've seen cases that have taken days to get a response. Have you seen any sign of physical abuse?" "No," he responded. "No bruises, no blood from what I can see." Well, we'll see if the doctors can find anything. You may have trouble getting her to go with you." "I'll try talking to her for a bit first, but help is on the way. I have a friend who's volunteered to help me get through on a couple of occasions. We've had pretty good luck with him. He should be here any minute." "I'd like to know his secret for getting through," Martinez said. "Oh," she replied with a slight smile, "it's no secret. When you meet him, you'll understand." Turning from the officer, the caseworker approached the girl in the corner and knelt before her. "Hello there," she said softly. "I'm Ms. Walker, and I'm here to help you. Won't you tell me your name?" The girl did not move. "Are you okay?" the caseworker continued. "Are you in any pain? Won't you tell me your name so I can help you?" As she began to realize the hopelessness of her attempt to communicate with the child, there was a movement in the doorway behind her. A 20-year-old woman stood before them, her right hand holding something behind her. Her hair was cut short, and she wore tan capris with a red shirt that appeared to serve as a uniform. On one side of the shirt was a logo that Martinez could not immediately read, but he could see the name Elizabeth embroidered on the opposite side. "Are you ready for us?" the girl asked. "Oh, yes," Walker said, standing. She turned to Martinez with a smile. "This should do it. Watch." The girl was on the floor leaning against the wall, her face still buried between her knees. After a moment, she could hear an unusual click-click sound on the linoleum floor as something approached her. With great force, she was able to avoid looking up. It wasn't until she became aware of a warm, panting breath on the side of her face that she felt her senses being pulled up to the light from the darkness in which they had dwelt. Turning her head slightly to look around the corner of her knee with one eye, she beheld a warm, friendly, comforting face. She had never seen a collie dog before, but she looked him over as he stood next to her now. She studied his thick, flowing sable coat, his long, pointed muzzle, ears erect but tipped slightly and held forward attentively, his head enshrined in a grand white ruff which surrounded his neck like a king's robe, his small brown eyes looking into hers with concern, and she knew she had never seen anything so beautiful. He wore a short blue canvas vest on which was embroidered several official-looking certifications. His tail wagged slowly from side to side, and he stood near her, his head tilted slightly to one side, as if asking for permission to come closer. He didn't need to. The girl turned to him, placing her arms around his neck, and buried her face in his luxurious coat as she erupted in sobs. Holding his leash, Elizabeth spoke to the dog quietly. "That'll do, Kane," she said.